episode of Third Eye Mind Group. That we are three friends, three colleagues that got together. We met every week before Zoom was cool. That's my favorite thing to say each week. And we had great discussions and great conversations, and we decided, why not? We thought our opinions mattered enough for you to be a part of them. So each week we come on here and we talk about stuff, and sometimes we bring guests on. And this week, Chris Delgado is on a little mini vacation, well-deserved, so she won't be joining us this weekend. But I have Millie, and we have a special guest. Dr. Barry Warren is on with us this week. He is a master transformational training. It's also exciting for Millie and I because he's also our personal mentor. He got to spend a lot of time with us, teaching us to be transformational trainers and all of that stuff. So he saw us for years down the road, like up until we are now. So it was a phone call, and he was an absolute yes, because that's the kind of guy that he is. So I want to thank you for being on here with us, Barry. And it's an honor to have you here, because you're always just a cool guy to shoot the shit with and talk to. So thanks for being here. Those of you that have joined, remember that you can enter your comments in or ask any questions tonight. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about some distinctions about the work of transformation. A lot of you have been asking, like, how do we sustain this work as COVID and everything that's happening in our world is happening. But Barry's a fun guy to talk about different personalities and styles, which I know a lot of people, because you're the people that when you're online, you're taking all those personality tests to see what you are. This guy knows a lot about that. So we could dive into that a little bit tonight too. So that's kind of what we're up to tonight. So ask any questions throughout the evening. And then if we find them appropriate to bring up and ask, we will absolutely ask your questions to Barry. And we'll go from there.
Do I have to speak as quick as you're speaking? Because I don't know if I can do it.
No, I just talk fast. I'm just a talk faster.
You know that Chris had a radio show in college, so she's got the radio show.
I don't doubt it.
We make her do the intro for that reason. There, I like that she outed you as our mentor. I'm not sure that you wanted that.
Oh boy!
I take the credit and the blame, I guess. Then, right?
Only all the time.
So, Barry, can you tell us a little bit, because some of our listeners are not familiar with the trainings that we have met you through. So can you tell us a little bit about your history with trainings, like how long you've been around and what trainings you've done and how they...
I was a chiropractor back in the 80s, teaching at a chiropractic college in Long Island, New York Chiropractic College. And someone told me they could make more money doing this course. So I said, I went and took it. And if they had told me it was all about me and who I am, and that my results in life actually came from who I'm being every day, I wouldn't have gone. So anyway, so I went. I struggled with it because I didn't want to believe what they were telling me. It put too much power in my hands. Looking back, I didn't see it that way. To me, it sounded like blame and fault. But as I began to listen, I started to notice that it was actually them telling me I've always had the power to have what I want. I tried to reject it and just couldn't. So I kept going. And literally since 1988, I've been in a training all the time. This is actually the longest period of time during COVID that I haven't been in a training of any type, because what's going on is they're not, obviously everyone knows what's going on. So anyway, but the trainings themselves are about, they're called ontological trainings. There's things called ontological coaching. Ontological simply means the study of being. In other words, who I'm being now generates a certain result. Everyone is generating results depending on who they're being, how they're being. You can think of it as the characteristics they bring to the day, the moment, the conversation, the relationship. So if I'm being loving, I generate results mostly that are loving results. If I'm a jerk, I generate results mostly that a jerk generates, which is conflict and disagreement and trouble. And they don't necessarily, the jerk doesn't necessarily know that they're actually the cause of it. Not the cause like blame though, but the cause like who they're being is generating what's going on. That's a revelation. It was a revelation to me. So I just kept going and I loved it. Loved watching people come to grips with it. And then I decided to become a trainer. After I retired from chiropractic, I actually became a coach for a while with a company called the Master Circle. coach just health professionals, natural health professionals. When I say natural, I mean non-medical, because what the hell do I know about drugs? As far as I was a chiropractor at the time, as I said, but I know a lot about how to be with people in a natural conversation. So anyway, I did that for 10 years. And then during that, I trained to be a trainer because I always loved being in the transformational environment. And all of a sudden, people actually thought I was good at it, which kind of shocked me. That was my not enough stuff. I always said, oh, you couldn't do it. Because that was one of the things I found out I had, some not enough stuff, I used to call it. I wasn't generating results in my life consistent with I'm not enough, but that didn't stop me from thinking that way anyway. And I know some of you understand what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so
It was this guy that actually had me get the work on a whole new level on something we called a first weekend about 10 years ago. There was something that, he said that some of you might go, what does that even mean? But it was a sentence of like, well, I'm not saying like we're God, but we're like God with kind of like a lowercase g. And like those of you, it might not make sense right now, but in that moment, and Cassandra Tenenbaum, you're on here watching, you were one of my teammates. And it was this moment of like, oh, okay, I'm into this. Like it was this thing where like, okay, I can be here because I came in not like the most spiritual, person on the planet and a little resistant to spirituality. And this work was at sometimes a little woo-woo outside of my box. And Barry was the one that actually brought it and grounded it for me, like to see where I could implement this every day in my life. So I had a Barry moment, as I call it. Like it was a aha moment. And Cassandra actually has a question. She said, I think you'll answer this one. It says, hey, Barry, what are your most recent takeaways of current events from an ontological perspective?
Well, I'm not going to address current events,
Right.
because that's like talking about politics or religion or Vietnam or something else that is a no-win conversation, no matter which you take.
Mm-hmm.
So if she wants to ask a specific question, I'll be happy to answer, but I'm not going to talk about politics or.
Okay. So Cassandra, ask specifically ontologically.
Yeah, ontologically what? Like, what is everybody being? I mean, what's the question?
Okay. And then her other question is, what is your favorite aspect of the work of transformation?
Favorite aspect is the moment someone actually begins to understand that the training isn't trying to tell them what to think or do. The training wants them to see their thinking and see if it lines up with what they want. That's a moment where someone just goes, it's sort of like, I'm old, so there's a thing that RCA Victor dog looking in the,
yes, I know exactly what you mean.
And the dog is like, what's that noise? Well, that's the moment I enjoy the most, and it happens repeatedly because it doesn't happen to anybody at the same time. But I could be talking to somebody and I'll say something, and all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, this guy's not even like trying to make me wrong. He's trying to show me something, which is really the fun part. And you guys now know it because you're trainers yourselves. There's a moment when someone's light just goes on and you couldn't buy it and they couldn't pay for it, but they could work for it. And that's the point.
Aha moments.
Yeah, it's almost bigger than an aha moment, because you can have an aha moment reading a magazine. In the trainings, they have an aha moment in the middle of trying to be right about something else, determined that their history has to be the way it is and my future is going to be just like the way it's always been. And all these things are going on and they make sense considering how they're thinking. But the moment they can see a different way of thinking, all of a sudden, all that stuff can be redefined and reimagined. And you can see it happen. We call it a breakthrough, and you guys have all seen them. And that's my favorite thing, by far. And it looks lots of different ways. So, but that's the moment. It's a moment.
I was thinking about when you, some of your either Barryisms, things that we are so used to, like you're probably one of the most quoted trainer, at least in my, like Barry, the way Barry says it, or my friend Barry says, every trainer I know says, and sometimes Barry jokes just don't land for other trainers, but one of the ones that I think
It's true.
we've all said, I don't want to say we all have, but a lot of us have said, I've heard myself say it, I've heard it, is about like, you know, one person calls you an ass. Oh, well, two people, coincidence, three people buy a saddle. I love that one. And when you were talking earlier, I could hear you in my mind, how many times that has ran. Like, if I'm running into everybody I run into is an asshole today, guess what? I'm being an ass. It's all back at me.
And just so you know, Michael Strasner actually said that, not I. I
Okay.
stole it from Michael. Michael Strasner is a master trainer from Life Spring Days. I give him credit because he's the one who said it to me so that I could recognize that if everybody's calling me an ass, it isn't them. it's me. And I don't have to be offended by it unless I want to be. And that's consistent with a certain way of thinking. I could use it as valuable because if I want to be seen as an ass, I could just say I'm doing a good job. But if I don't, then you know, I have a moment where I could we call it shift, do lots of things. It's a brand new moment, and I could absolutely redefine myself in any moment. Most people in society at large don't really believe what I just said because their history is so powerful in their thinking. Like, this is true about me is what they'll say. So we have conversations of, you know, what's true. You know, people think they know the truth. That's a fun one too. So Cassandra, there's a ton of things, and every single time someone comes to a realization for themselves, not realization like I would necessarily think it's the same. That's another interesting thing. We don't necessarily all agree, and we actually get off on it during the trainings, but we'll align. In other words, we have similar energies going in the same direction. That's all we need. You know, and politically, that's what we need. And all I'll say about the ontological aspect of the politics of today is that people want agreement, and they're not willing to go with alignment, meaning they want everyone to be on the same page. You're either this or that, and therefore, if you're not the way I am, you're bad and wrong. That can't work. It never has. It's never been expected. It's always been about alignment, meaning for the most part, we agree with all the things, and we have some disagreements, which gives the whole experience flavor. People are pushing for something that's not available, which is agreement about everything. Never happened.
Well, nor would we really want it. I mean, I think about how boring that
would
be.
Boring. Righteous people want it. They want it. They're okay with you going away if you're wrong.
That's the part that I've been a little bit like, it's been amazing to me. And I know that I've done it. So I'm not in judgment. I know that there's been times where I have been wanting to be so right that I would, in my mind, not in my actions, but, you know, knowing that what I believe about my mind creates everything, wanting to be so right that I would even think about, well, like someone will say something mean and I'll think, I'll hope this happens to you so you know how it feels. And I look back prior to the trainings and think, man, I used to think that way. I used to believe that I wanted so badly to be right that I would think bad thoughts about you and hope bad things on you so that I could be right about my own thinking. And I look back and I'm like, wow. So it has that does for me is remembering that I did that and that I could still do that at any given day or time if I lose connection. It helps me.
You can't anymore. Here's the thing. That's the thing about breakthrough. Once you have a breakthrough in that way of thinking, you know you used to do it. You could even fantasize that you could do it again, but in reality, you know that you're not going to go back there.
Well, it helps me be compassionate, I think, towards people that are still doing it. It reminds me that, like, listen, human beings are going to do, it's part of the human condition. Human beings do what human beings do. And it's not really, I don't need to feel bad about watching, you know, participating, like you were just talking about, might bring up a different sort of feeling in me than observing people in their natural environment, I guess, if you want to call it that.
You two guys trained to do the level where people have had do some work, and then you guys do the level 2, which is in the old days used to call the advanced course. Now we call it part 2, and some places call it breakthrough. But I like being in the first part where people from society at large come in with all this stinking thinking that they can get together and then bring it into the room and try and make themselves right about it frequently at the cost of themselves and other people. There is nothing more fun than having somebody see what's underneath that. Not make them wrong about it, because that isn't what the training is about. There's nothing more fun than having people decide not to think that way anymore. Not because they weren't wrong, not because they were wrong thinking that, but they can see, one, that the thinking won't lead to what they want, or two, that they didn't have all the facts that they actually could have. And then as soon as they get a couple extra facts, that thinking doesn't make sense anymore.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah.
We have another Maureen Downs. I love you, Maureen. You're
Yeah,
my favorite
good to see you
people.
in here.
It said, the last training Barry did, I was staffing. I saw him adjust on the fly to the new COVID mandates. How did you integrate all of that seamlessly?
Actually, it was interesting because I walked into the training that day knowing we were going to have social distancing and not touching. And they were going to put the seats 6 inches apart. So I went right over it. I really went over the top and told them, make it a foot. People thought I was like, oh my God, a foot. Right? But when I walked in, it's an interesting, people could see what they think about this. When I walked in, there were people out front that were staffing the training, meaning people that were supporting the training, registering people and doing things. And it was circled up and they were holding hands. And I said, we're not doing that this weekend, to them. And they went, and one of the people in charge said, well, we're not a space for the virus. And
Here we're back to that. It keeps coming up. And now Barry, like, what does that mean to you, man?
I said to him, I said, okay, great. And that has absolutely nothing to do with what I said. We are not doing that. You can be anything you want underneath whatever we're doing, but what we're doing is social distancing and responsibility consistent with the health department. Do it or you have to leave. Not like you're bad and wrong. You want to go not be a space with the virus. Go out where the virus is and let it know you're not a space. But in the training, that, and believe it or not, that's what we did. And it was, I didn't like doing the training that way, but people were very cooperative. And of course, the students don't know the difference, not because they're stupid in any way, but they didn't know what it would have looked like. They did what was available. And the way it worked out is they got a ton out of it, even with the social distancing, and they weren't hugging each other. They were doing a hand signal that represented a hug. So
one of the things I have always appreciated about you is you're very logical. Like you use a lot of that. And I know that I've been in trainings with you where people do the whole, like, talk about people's energy and space. And I never felt like you were making people wrong for it. You were like, yeah, that you got it that way. And here's another way to look at it. And I would have to say, like, safety for me watching you was rarely supportive coming from where I came from, that's my acute sense of safety was okay. Like I didn't have to be completely like, I wasn't wrong if I didn't believe I could create a space and a bubble that would stop me from getting COVID-19, that I needed actual physical space between me and the next person, or that, whatever it may be, like I was okay. Cause what I thought it was supposed to happen is I was supposed to become this, like, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. That means it doesn't exist. And if I'm hearing it, then I'm somehow I'm the person creating it. And it was like,
well, the rules, the health department rules had nothing to do with the training. But suddenly we were commanded, if you will, that we had to obey them. Well, okay, if we can't run our business unless we obey them, then you obey them.
Right.
It was a non-question. It wasn't, and I'm not a space for a conversation. Everybody has the right to that, but not during the business of running a training during a pandemic with certain health department rules.
Well,
so you just incorporate them, and you don't make them wrong. You don't make them heavy. You put them in place and you work.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is important, because I've stepped into that too, because owning a transformational center now, people like to give their opinions and their, what we think we should be doing during a pandemic and what we shouldn't be. And it was quite fascinating to me, people thinking, that the trainings could still happen in the space. And then people actually even saying, oh, well, who's going to know? And I'm like, I know, right? Like, it's important to me to be in integrity. Like, and Francine and I said to each other, we're like, no way would we go against what any of these scientists and the CDC are saying to put another like person's life at jeopardy, not on our watch. Like,
Yeah, they'll
number
be
one, to
transformed in ICU. Good for
yeah,
them.
and then like even ourselves, but it is an interesting thing, like even in business, and it's not even just in the transformational business, but so many businesses, of course, I want to do these trainings in person. I want to be in a room real bad, and of course I want to do that, but there's no way I'm going to go against what's happening. And whether all these opinions and judgments and whatever, everyone's got a different opinion. But what you're saying is so many people wanted to make us wrong. And all we kept doing, Barry, was the same thing. No, this is what we're doing. This is what's happening in America. This is what's happening in the world. This is what we're doing, and this is what we're going to do to sustain the work of transformation. And our choice was to make them virtual. But it was just very, giving the facts, and this is the way it is here. And maybe somewhere
Yeah.
else you can go
And
find that, but not with me,
when it comes to the health department, they're not looking for agreement. I mean, alignment. Because now they're not looking for it. They're looking, you've got to agree with it or don't run your business. Mm-hmm. That's different from what I brought up before.
Yeah.
Well, and there, we've already agreed by being in certain businesses, or even like my driver's license, I have an implied, I consent that I sign it. It says I am going to and not going to do certain things, even if I don't know what they are. I've already signed that.
Ignorance,
this is true.
Ignorance is no excuse.
Ignorance is no excuse. And so I think about some of the things that we have in life in general, not just now, but always fought things we've already agreed to. And so we talked about, I heard you say sustainability, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask of you. Like, if people from here either have or haven't done the training, how could they, during this time when there's less accessibility to even go to a training or be a part of one? I mean, they have them online, of course, but the in-person and trainings aren't as available, and staffing isn't available or being in service in the same way they're used to. What would you suggest to people could support them during this time to stay within the work and to stay within the distinctions?
Well, if they are part of a community, transformational community, any one of them, read and then communicate with one another about, everybody reads a book. It's one of the many, many fabulous books that are out there. The Untethered Soul. Everyone reads The Untethered Soul, and they get together and they talk about it. You'd be shocked how much you'd learn. It's like anything else. You don't know what you don't know, and someone else doesn't know what they don't know, and it's different from you. So you can end up learning from one another. We have parts even in the training where people teach each other what they don't know everything about, but what they do know is a different piece than somebody else. That's how book clubs work. That's why they're so much fun. But if you take transformational conversations and go and do the same thing, I promise people will expand themselves. Without reading, you're limited anyway. I don't care if the trainings are here in person. Those who do not read, one of my favorite quotes is a Mark Twain quote. And his quote simply says, the person who does not read has absolutely nothing over the person who cannot read. And this is a great time for all the people who don't read, not because they're bad and wrong, or it's just, if you want to learn more about transformation and expanded thinking and accelerated learning, which is what we call this, read. I can send you
we know all
those
those books you had us read. We remember them quite well.
We got a new one, Speaking Being. That's what I told Millie's reading Speaking Being.
All right.
And she had to put it aside because it made her head explode.
Yeah, it's one of those books where you start reading, you're like,
more than extensional for dummies.
Extensional for dummies is easy.
That's like kindergarten compared to university.
Speaking Being is, and of course, Chris DeSanti had me read. You want to really blow your brains out. I don't know. Can you see? You can't see it.
Nope.
No. No. Okay. It's called I Am That, and I can't even pronounce the guy's name.
All
Who
right.
he's and Chris has it roll off his tongue. It's Sri Nisraga something.
That's all his time in India. That's why.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's called I Am That.
If you don't know, Chris DeSante is another trainer who is in
Yeah.
is another master trainer who was a mentor of Chris and mine as well.
Yeah, and when I need a new book, I'll ask Chris because he reads wild stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and he reads things I recommend too, but his stuff is different for me. So I wouldn't think to go find it myself. So that's what I would also recommend to you. Don't ask the friends that think exactly like you what to read. Find
Right.
someone who you think is on a different level than you, not because they're better than you. They've just done some different kind of work.
You know, one of my I am obsessed with this book, and it's called Sacred Basketball. And
Sacred Basketball.
Sacred Basketball. Now, the reason I was drawn to it was because it's Phil Jackson, right? Who I've always Phil Jackson, who was a coach of the Chicago Bulls, the Los Angeles Lakers, the New York Knicks, and every time he's coached, he's won championships. Not just one,
I
many.
think he played on the Knicks too, didn't he?
He did. So he's like the Mac Daddy when it comes to winning basketball championships. Wherever he goes, people win, right? Like play to win all the time with Phil Jackson. So I've been like in awe since I was like 12 years old of this coach. And I'm like, why does he always win? Like I remember being fascinated, like, why does he always win? Like the Bulls having 6 championships, then the Lakers, and then it was crazy. Then the Knicks weren't good, and then all of a sudden they were. I'm like, it's this guy. I'm telling you, he's a coach. So then when I stepped into the work of transformation and got coach on a whole, like being an athlete, then coming into the work of like this coach thing, I was like, all right, what's this guy doing? And I saw this book, and I was like, oh, I'm reading this, and it was all about leadership and coaching and bringing you know, inner work and the beingness of who you are and cohesiveness as a team, leaving all of the egos at the side, coming together with one purpose. You might not like each other, right? But we have a common vision, right? We have a common vision, and that we have a goal, and we become disciplined and committed to that only all the time. And I'm telling y'all, this book, it's a quick read, Sacred Basketball, but it like blew my mind if you're open to like leadership and coaching and vision and like playing to win, but creating, like taking so many personalities and having them come together, like to succeed on a team. Like this book just blew my mind. We added it to one of our reading lists because it blew my mind as far as, and who would have thought, like a little basketball book, but it like was the next level for me of leadership, vision, and being a good coach, you know?
And results.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Which is leadership in all the different trainings.
Yeah.
But he was a Zen kind of guy to begin with.
Yeah, he brings in a lot of Native American stuff to his coaching. Like they actually did like meditations and stuff. He would turn off the lights in the arena and make everybody be present. You know, like just be present, like, you know, all the players were like, what are you doing, man? Like they were all against it in the beginning, but you know, he just shut off the lights and be like, just be in the moment. Just be here now. And they were like,
and they'd say turn it off every night, you know.
Yeah.
Right. It's good stuff, but reading it blew my mind, just that.
But
that
seriously,
book, you know?
Find someone you respect that you don't necessarily hang out with, and just message them. What books do you recommend? You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
You really will.
Look at this, Barbara Ledbury. Get out of here, Barbara. She says, Phil is my second cousin. Are you playing with me, Barbara, or is that real?
Our dad's first cousin.
You and him over for dinner. Let's see. Kevin, oh, no freak. Yeah, my dad's first. Okay, I don't know what they're saying there, but that's so cool, Barbara, if that's a fun fact about your life. That's fun. So any other questions you have for Barry Warren here? We have about another 10, 12 minutes, comments or anything, but I don't know. You guys want to talk about like personalities a little bit? That's kind of your
by the way, Mitchell said the ML reading list is the best part. Reading list is the best part of ML. So
yeah, most people didn't do it though.
Mitchell's the one who read all the books.
Yeah, he's the only one, I assure you.
So like Chris was saying, like personality matrix personality, you are have always been the one who spoke a lot into different personality styles when it comes to team. And you mentioned that just now, Chris, when you were talking about, was it Phil Jackson?
Yes, Millie.
I'm gonna have to read the book now.
Remember we were talking about your people, my people. He's like my people. I'd want to have dinner with him just to talk to him, you know?
He's probably
Fantastic.
so zen, he'll just sit there and over the food and then
Cassandra
eat.
reads every day. I believe you read every day. She's a very brilliant woman.
Yes, you are.
Always kind of notice brilliant people tend to read a lot. It's just kind of like goes
You
hand in
can't
hand.
you can't keep expanding your thinking. Not your, your world can keep expanding, but think about it. If you think about it, the value of reading is it generates new questions. It's not like learning stuff. It's asking new questions. Now that may even sound a little woo-woo to some people, but that's the value of reading. It makes you keep wondering, but not like not being satisfied or being not satiated. It's there is no end to what's available because we're not, as human beings, we're not capable of what's available. So,
Right.
Not during this
a little bit of the
conference.
misanthrope in me there. I won't even get into that, but yeah,
I
you just keep on doing it.
I love the way books take you places that you could, like your mind, you go places that you could never create, even in like movies. And I remember a few years back, my husband had been really ill in the hospital, and one of his friends bought him a book, Og Mandino, the greatest salesman in the world.
Yep.
And I'm reading this book on an airplane going to Mexico. He had gotten better, never read the book.
Teeny thin book.
Super. You can read it on literally like a 2.5 hour ride from Missouri to Cancun. I'm reading this book. I get to the God Mandarinda and I'm on this book. My husband's 2 seats set. I'm back here, and also I'm like, like ugly snot tearing on this plane. And he's looking back at me, and the people are, oh, sure don't hold back all the tears. And I'm sure they were like, this lady's lost her mind. And I couldn't stop reading. It wasn't like I could get my composure and stop reading the book. I just had to keep reading and be okay with it. But again, it took me to a place I just hadn't been in a long time. You know what I mean? Where I had it spoke to this part of me that doesn't always get touched by everyday occurrences. And there are books out there, there's great books, and then there's great books. And for me, during that time where I was at in my life and what I was experiencing, I think that book was such an opening for me. And some of his other books are great too, but that one was particularly a great book.
You can go on and on and on and on and on about there's just books, some people just don't like them, but then they should listen to them on Audible.
I was going to say, that's a really cool invention.
Yeah, Audible's a fabulous guy. Now, not 95% of the books are on Audible. All the existentialism for dummies is not on there.
True.
But aside from that,
I know we looked.
Everything else is on there. All the dummy books aren't on there.
Remember when we read Est and it was like audio, but it didn't say it right, and it was saying,
I refuse to listen to it.
Assholes. We tried to find all the books Barry gave us, by the way, in case you're wondering why we think we're funny. We tried to find them all on Audible, but they weren't. So we had to actually read hard-covered books.
I know. I annoy a lot of people still. I just gave them.
It was actually good. I was so grateful for that because I was like, because I was like in the do mode, like go, go, go. So like all of my reading did come from listening in the last few years prior to me doing the internship, because I'd be like, every day I drive to work on 95, like 45 minutes. So it was a great opportunity, but I never took the time to open a book. And I'll never forget during the internship, because I've always loved reading. And then I was like, there's just something about holding the book for me, and I was so grateful for that moment. I'm like, I get to read a book, but it brought it back to my love of the actual book.
It's what sits on next to my computer. This is what I do when I have lulls between appointments. I just open books and start looking at them because of this.
Yeah, and and there's nothing wrong with listening to them. Matter of fact, they did a study that was reported in the New York Times a couple of months ago, and they were saying when it comes to things like this, transformational, informational, educational, but not like biology or chemistry or math, you retain just as much listening to it as you will if you read it.
Well,
so the fact is
that's funny, because somebody just asked a question. Excuse me if I pronounce your name wrong, Mirka. said, what's the difference between reading a book or listening to it? Like, is there a difference?
So I actually thought listening would be less retentive, although I frequently enjoy it more. But when I read this in the Times, it was like from Harvard something. It was one of those Ivy League things. Now, I'm not saying they're always right, but it was interesting to see somebody actually did some cognitive work on, is there a real difference? And there is a real difference in factual stuff like, as again, math, chemistry, where you need to memorize things. But in all the kinds of things we've been discussing, the kinds of books we're talking about, the Bandino book, the greatest salesman in the world, no difference.
Well, when I did A Course of Miracles with Chris DeSante, actually, I listened and read at the same time because it was the only way I could make it through. Like, there were times I would read the page and go, what did I just read? And then I would listen and I would find my brain trying to shut down and go to sleep. So I found if I read and listened at the same time, like I was listening out loud, it supported me. So I wish Speaking Being had it on audio so I could read and listen at the same time.
Yeah, don't hold your breath on that one.
I'm not. The only way that's going to happen is if you read it out loud. Someone suggested it. Read it out loud. Thank you, Evan. Barry, if you decide to read that out loud, record yourself, send it to Chris and I. We'll read along.
Well, believe it or not, reading out loud creates better retention. That's another thing they talked about in this article. They said people that are willing to just read whatever they read out loud will remember much more, because now you're using two different parts of the brain. You're actually hearing yourself and you're speaking it and reading it. And I'm going, all right. I mean, well, I haven't done it, but I thought it was interesting.
Well, when I was a teacher, they actually would tell us that if a child was having a hard time like learning to read, that even though they might resist reading out loud because maybe they're challenged a little bit or struggling, they said that it'll actually have them understand it more, even if they're slower or take more time. It's worth it because it helps with their comprehension. For sure. They had us do that years ago.
Yeah, well, it just got to me.
Yeah, but I forgot about that until you just said it. I was like, yeah, I remember having Mitchell Stern says I prefer books over people. I'm just saying. All right.
I'm not going to get into that one. Then Mitchell over there.
And then, Evan says you should read them out loud and record it, get paid for it. It depends. If it's read by the author and it's about a profound experience, then listening is awesome. Many lives, many masters is a perfect example.
Yeah, the most horrid example is Listen to the Power of Now or New Earth, read by Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. But once you get into it, I kind of started liking him.
You know what bothered me was The Way of the Superior Man, listening to him. I don't know why his voice doesn't match the book, but a book that if you haven't read yet or listened to, it's Kevin White, and he writes, or David White, and he writes The Three Marriages, and he has this thick Irish brogue. So he's a poet. So as he reads this book out loud, I'm like imagining this Irishman, with a pipe talking. It really just enhances the experience, at least for me. And it's a great book.
Yeah, and there's people like Malcolm Gladwell, who writes great, interesting books, and he's got a fabulous voice. So, take it again.
This is the time where we like for our guests to share a humanizing story. And
you told me to be careful with that, and then I didn't know what the hell you wanted from me with that.
Watch out.
Story.
We want whatever you're willing to give. So it's about 3 to 5 minutes, something that's humanizing. A lot of times people who come on here are great storytellers. Something that has people see you, take you off of the stage onto the ground. You're a man that puts your pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
How do you know? I gotta stick both feet out.
I don't know. You better call Carol on that one.
You can sit down, put them
Carol's
both
his wife,
in,
by
and
the
pull
way,
it up.
in case you guys are wondering.
Carol's awesome. Shout out to Carol.
Shout out to Carol.
She just got on the exercise bike in the back.
I love Carol.
So.
I always tell Carol I want to get addicted to working out. That's the one thing I couldn't get. That and phonics.
She is totally.
She's great.
Totally.
That's funny. I never said that.
So let's see. A humanizing experience. I could tell you some stories about, when my dad and mom passed away 2 weeks apart after 63 years of marriage. And people think it was it was tough, but the interesting thing was my dad and mom passing away was like a Neil Simon play, meaning they were both dying and they both knew it and they weren't afraid. So without the fear, the comedy started to sneak in. And let me tell you, there were things that happened that I just didn't know were going to be funny, you know. And only in retrospect, I'll give you an example, and then my mom was a tough lady. She would curse, but only under her breath or behind closed doors. But when she did, you paid attention because something had to be wrong. Anyway, so she they were all quite sick, and they were in this assisted living facility. And then my mom had to go get a test. So she went to the assisted living facility at some hospital, took the test, and died. But they brought her back. Now, the problem here was she had a DNR, meaning do not resuscitate. But it was back at the nursing home. So my mom now, she, was quite adamant, let us all know that she ever died. She didn't want to be brought back. She wanted to be kept up, that whole story. Anyway, so my dad is back in the nursing home. My mom is in the thing, and they got a tube down her throat. And I came to visit her because they told me she was gonna make it. And I went, oh, And then they told me she died right in front of her. All right. And I looked down and her eyes are like furious. Now she's got the tube down her throat, so she can't talk. And I'm going, does she know she died? Can she hear us? And she said, yeah. I said, okay. And I could see she was livid behind this tube. Anyway, they pull the tube out, and the first thing she says is, what the? And she starts cursing like a drunken sailor at the doctors and the nurses about bringing it back. Anyway, my father, now remember, I'm sitting there going, oh, gee. My father is back at the nursing home thinking my mom died because he hasn't heard from her. I said, you got to call Dad. And her voice, because of the tube, was like this. It's like. And then I realized if she calls it, he won't believe it's her. Sure enough, she calls him, and he's going, that's not my wife. Oh my God. And he's freaking out. And my sister's with him, and she says, that's Mom. No, she had to give him some information that nobody knew. So he calmed down. I'm telling you, it was 6 months of this kind of insanity that it would have made, my brother, who was in the movies and now he's retired, said we should write a Neil Simon play about the death of our parents because they did stuff that was just nuts.
Wow.
And I used to laugh with them. I actually asked them once when they were at a table, are you guys racing towards the finish line together? Or are you trying to see who can beat the other? And we laughed. It was nothing like what I thought it was going to be. Oh, did I miss them? Did I wish they weren't sick? Of course. But if you have to have two people sick who are dying together, let me tell you, they did a great job of not making it a burden. And I actually said to them, they actually thought I was amazing because I wasn't depressed. But I thought they were amazing. To this day, I'm still awed by how they just kind of trotted off into illness and into death and didn't. The only bad time was when my mom died first. My dad, they argued for 60 years. And then I'll end with this. This, again, comedy. But we're at the restaurant after my mom's funeral, and I go, what should we put on the tombstone? Because, you're close too. He goes, I don't know. So I said, well, and by the way, this is what's on their tombstone. I said, how about we write, here lies two people who loved each other very much. One of them was always right.
That's what's on there?
That's what's on their double tombstone. My brother-in-law sees it. Now, Jewish people, I'm Jewish, so Jewish people wait a year before they unveil the tombstone. It's called the unveiling. So those people come to hear it, and they see this, and my aunt goes, what the hell does that mean? I said, you know them, read it. And she She was pissed to this day, but smiled because they argued forever and loved each other dearly.
How long were they married?
63 years.
Wow.
Wow, that's great.
So
And they passed 2 weeks, you said,
2 weeks
of each other?
apart. So we got him one tombstone, and it said, "Here lies two people who loved each other very much. One of them was always right." And that way we
That's
didn't
the
have to tell
best
you,
tombstone.
we didn't have to tell anybody who was right ever.
Figure it out for yourself.
That's
Yep.
such a good story. I just
Yep.
learned something new about you, Barry. That's a good story.
That is a great story.
I didn't know what to do, so I came up with that for now.
That's a
I
good
don't
one.
have
Well,
any
that's a
idea what the
fantastic
lesson
one.
is in it, but there you go.
Well, the stories don't necessarily have to have lessons. Some of them are just meant to entertain us, and that was very entertaining. And it makes me feel like a little bit. I had a little smile on my face about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that they
Still do.
died 2 weeks apart is amazing to me. You hear
Oh,
about that all the time with people.
during Hurricane Wilma,
Oh,
Oh
and
man,
there's comical stories about that. Oh,
I can only imagine.
just one after the other. The rabbi had a kid's microphone, like yellow and blue with a purple wire, talking to the crowd because it was, and I'm sitting here going, oh my God. Neil Simon couldn't have done better than I could have done writing all this stuff down.
That's fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's time to wrap up. So I want to thank you, Dr. Barry Warren, for joining us this evening. We so appreciate it. And the picture of New Zealand is New Zealand, right?
That is, I actually took that picture. You just pulled to the side of the road, and that's the way New Zealand looks.
You want to know what's funny about that is Francine keeps telling me that if the world keeps happening, it's a joke between us. She goes, we're moving to New Zealand.
Yeah.
So she said, like, I better get ready, have my bags packed. I said, New Zealand. She goes, that's where I want to go in the world. I'm going to live in New Zealand. I said, okay. And now you're giving me a reason I can leave here and go, hey, I get it. I want to live in New Zealand now too. So this picture is enrolling me, Barry. So it's good stuff.
You have no idea. The most beautiful place. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, she really wants to go. I'm like,
there's a lot of thank yous and beautiful stories on here from people saying you did their part one or you did their first weekend. And so, I mean, you're just such a treasure to our community. And I wanted to be able, I know Chris the same, wanted to share you with people who are from our community and from all of our communities. I mean, it's all one big community anyway, who are listening to get a little taste of what it's like to be in relationship with you, and it's an honor to have you in our lives. Thank you. I still call Barry, even though my internship ended almost 2 years ago. I still call Barry, or a year and a half ago, and get coaching on different stuff. That's the beauty of our community. Like, we're never really, like, everyone has your back. I mean, anytime you need support, if you're willing to be coached, people are willing to coach you. And with that being said, I know Chris and I both, and Chris Delgado, want to continue to sustain this work, whatever way it looks, for now and in the future. So I've been working on what's called the Frontline Mind and Body Project, which is a group of police officers, medical professionals, firemen, EMTs, attorneys, you name it, coming together in order to create mindful and emotional intelligence practices for people in the front lines. And we will be launching that very shortly. A very interesting group of dynamic, because we get to hear everybody's vision. So many people come to the training with a similar vision. It was great to bring them together, be a part of that team. And so I'm super excited. So keep looking out for Frontline Mind and Body Project as it comes forward. We meet on Tuesdays, every Tuesday, actually before Third Eye Mind Group Mastermind. We mastermind before that, and have a lot of great people. It looks like we'll be ready to start a pilot very, very shortly. So that being said, I know Chris Austin has tons of virtual trainings coming up. One of them,
we have. So I own a transformational center that does the trainings that we talk about here and there, and that we've talked about tonight. It's called AMP Trainings, and we've been keeping the work sustainable. And we have a version of the trainings that was redesigned to keep the work going, and we have our next one starting on the 18th of July, so that's next weekend, 18th and 19th. It's still open for enrollment. I'll put the link in here at the end. You can sign up for that. We also, something that has been brought to our attention is that we talk a lot in this work that we all have the feminine and the masculine principles. inside each and every one of us. And it's been very interesting conversations amongst people in our lives and stuff like that. And it was actually our sons that inspired us to write this course called The Integration. So it's a course, 2-day course, where we're bringing the masculine and the feminine, where men, women, people can all come to take the course together to learn how to be in flow with the masculine and feminine principles, and to be in relationship with those. So we're excited about that. That's coming out in August. You can read more about that in the link I put down below too. And it's just, it's a way for us to sustain this work and to keep it going. And then I know Chris Delgado, who is relaxing probably on a kayak somewhere, is she does Rise Up to Love. She does Rise Up to Love, and she does the little happiness workshops. I think she's got one starting up again soon. And I don't know if she's doing her Thrive, but check her out too on Rise Up to Love, and we'll make sure we put that down in the comments as well too. And yeah, that's what we're up to. So check us out. We love your support, and we look forward to next week. And we thank you, Barry, for being on with us this week.
It was fun.
Yes. Love you, Barry. Thank you.
I'll see you guys.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.